We've got an interesting topic that we're going to be discussing today. It's actually the future of soft power, both in Australia as well as in India. And the two interesting personalities that we'll be interviewing today is Peter Corke as well as Maureen Chen. Let's go have a quick chat with them, shall we? Thanks so much, Maureen and Peter, for joining me today to really talk more about what you do. Primarily here in Australia and back home in India as well. Now the topic is soft power. In your opinion, what is it in Australia that's missing in India? If you could answer that question, Maureen.
I think the strength, let's say, of Australia is what people say fair go, which means really giving everyone a chance. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is whatever makes you happy, love. These are my two favorite sayings in Australia, because that also frees people to be what they're born to be, you know. And I think sometimes, you know, we can get locked into what should be, and, you know, parents influence strongly. I mean, what I do like though in India is there is a strong parental care and guidance that sometimes I think has been a bit lost in Australia, but I think in India there's still respect for parents, but also I think parents still hold that some wisdom and you know, it's kind of been passed
sense
down.
Of authority, do you think?
Also, but from what I see from the young people, it's not that they're submitting, it's more that they really appreciate. I know it's not always, but the people I meet, they appreciate their parents' wisdom and guidance for the most part.
Now, Peter, from your experience of soft power, if you could share with us what you think the definition is in the first place.
I think soft power is a relatively new paradigm, where it's not power and authority from above imposed below. It's a far more cooperative approach to the world. In Australia, because of the history of Australia, I mean, apart from our Aboriginal heritage, it's a relatively new country, and it was born through pretty tough times. And the concept of mateship that evolved out of that is actually a very important tenet, because in terms of mateship, it means that I might be serving you, but at a level. I'm not subservient to you, I'm not superior. And on that basis, I think Australia is one of the most egalitarian countries in the world.
Now, you speak of the two countries and their relationships, but if we could break it down to what you have been able to experience truly about the future of power in India.
Well, both Peter and I were sharing that in our teens, we both went to India looking for meaning in life. Because sometimes when you're just surrounded by comfort and pleasure, it can feel very empty. And so I think as India develops, it's good if it doesn't lose the richness that it has. And I think that's the strength in India. Like we say, you know, you just scratch an Indian and underneath the skin there's spirituality. I mean, on the outside you might see a different story, but I've met over 1,500 leaders there, whether they were movie directors, sports people, cricketers, scientists, doctors, and there's just an innate spirituality. I mean, I am meeting selected people. It's not that, you know, I don't want to paint it all rosy, because there's a lot of other things happening in India. In fact, if you read the newspapers, you'd think India's finished. You'd think India's hopeless case. But because of meeting the leaders, because I'm only meeting the top leaders.
Peter, if you could just add from the Australian point of view, whether there's anything society can do to actually change its impression on power in general, and how you can actually mold that into something that you can use as a resource in itself.
I think with soft power, one of the important things is that countries realise that as they progress, as they grow, they can deliver something quite unique on this values basis. If you take India at the moment, it's growing tremendously, and it's up against China, it's up against the US and so on.
Yep.
But it should do that in a uniquely Indian fashion.
True. Stay true to
Which
its
is an
cultural
evolution of its
values.
cultural values, not discarding them.
Yep.
Similarly in Australia, as we grow into Asia, we need to find who also reflects our values. But ultimately, all this should be an expression of core values at grassroots level. And I think Australians do have that in general. India has that fantastic spiritual history. It has such richness and depth. And now it's got accelerated power, wealth, and what an opportunity to start delivering those values across the globe.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you both about this. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks,
and
Natasha.
Maureen, for sharing your insights, really, both from an India and Australia perspective, because both of you, you've lived here for 40 years,
Yes.
and you obviously spent a majority of your childhood and growing up here as well.
Yeah.
And before you moved over to India. So it's a great mixture of perspectives that we can get, actually, in terms of what's happening in India already and what can happen in Australia. So thanks so much for joining us.